Welcome to the Fortean Winds podcast, where we talk about UFOs and all the related high strangeness. I'm Bones, and with us, as always, is RamX.
Hey, everybody.
Yo, Ram. So the last time we tracked the American oligarchy from the beginning, from the founding fathers right up to today's trillion-dollar asset managers, we established that the elite power structure never went away. It simply upgraded its cage and shifting from physical force to kind of a systemic information control. And that brings us to that concept of the digital cage. And now we confront the deepest, darkest mechanism of that cage, the one secret that proves the system is designed to protect wealth and control. Above all else, the UAP secrecy. We always have to touch on that because it always seems to go that way, you know?
Yeah.
It's always there.
And it's really how we started. So it's great that we can try to pull it all back together.
Right.
And I think also we're going to be able to tie in the Epstein stuff and why we were talking about that, because it really exposes this network that is in control of so much. And they are also in control and have deeper knowledge of the UAP phenomenon. And I know, like, when we first started, my big problem with getting any of this information was like, well, if it was real, I would already know.
Right.
And I think the majority of the public is still trying to figure that out. Like, hey, how could this be real and I not know? And how do big secrets get kept? I was having trouble trying to wrap my brain around how to weave this all together. But one way I thought we could really demonstrate it is with the Kennedy assassination. So when JFK was assassinated, right, everyone knew that the government was involved. There was a bunch of shady stuff going on. They did an investigation and said, we're not going to tell you the results of it for 50 years.
Right.
50 years roll by, and they go, hey, we're not really going to tell you all of it anyway.
Right.
So, and we swallow all that. How could we as Americans live in a transparent democratic republic if they can assassinate whoever we elect?
Right. Right. Just by saying, hey, well, that's just too important for us to know. That doesn't make any sense.
Right. So if you never had Kennedy as an option, they chose your options for you, right? And this is a great example of how that elite power structure gives us the illusion of freedom while maintaining control. So today we're going to use our analysis to expose the tools the oligarch used to employ this real bird of transformative knowledge that's kept in UAP and paranormal circles. We'll talk about how they keep that locked away, and we'll show you their three-pronged strategy of obfuscation. They have the corporate black box. It's number one. And this is how defense contractors use trade secret and classified, and the laws around what private contractors have to tell Congress versus what the government employees have to tell Congress. There's strong evidence that would suggest that this was all moved under private contractors, and I mean UAP technology and research was moved under private contractors during the Nixon era. So at that point, they would be able to tell Congress to piss off.
Right.
So then you can turn whatever research that you find through UAP technology into wealth. You could use it to create proprietary things. And there's people who believe that some of our technology all tracks back to UAP crash retrievals. And if we look at the trajectory of technology, it does align, but that's not enough. And we know that, right? We need to go find where are these specific cases. Like Jacques Vallée, for example, was doing one of his Gandalfian riddles, and he was like, they're going to allow you to play with this technology for a few years before they then pull it back and gatekeep it. But there is technology that we got from a UFO that is being socialized into the public. My best guess on what that is AI.
Right. Could be.
Because the way he was describing it and the path that we're seeing, where at first, I mean, I was able to build my own AI, I was able to do whatever without guardrails, and now the guardrails are just getting even worse, and the AI itself is getting more limited. So they're clearly trying to pull it back. So if I'm looking at what he said, and if I believe it, and I look at the trajectory of AI, I think that may be what he's talking about. And then there's the legislative gutting. We saw this happen during the Schumer Rounds Amendment, which was intended to give us UAP secrecy. It was intended to force UAP secrecy. But what they did was they went in there and gutted it. And they made sure that there was no third parties, that they could continue the lies. So legislative gutting is one big tactic they used. And let's think about that in the context of our last episode where we discussed lobbying. So if you have certain people, like say Thomas Massie, who clearly doesn't care about party and is actually on the side of the American people, and he's like, I just want this Epstein disclosure. What you can do is use all of the congressmen that you control as a lobbying outfit and a donor to suppress Thomas Massie.
Right.
And you make him look like a fool, and you use all of your money to propagandize him, and you get influencers who you own to talk trash about Thomas Massie. So we're watching that happen in real time. And then there's the psychological cage. So we have corporate black box, we have legislative gutting, and then there's the psychological cage, which is really maintained by our digital ecosystem and environment, as we talked about. That's the real birds in digital cages.
Right.
But this is how they like weaponize words like conspiracy theory, and they get you to self-censor. And I think 3i Atlas, and we can work in a quick update on that. 3i Atlas is a great example of that. Because I was pretty hesitant on calling it anything anomalous. And I still am measured about calling it something anomalous. But let's look at where we are today. So Avi Loeb said a week ago that on October 29th, that the path of the comet was going to get closer to the sun, and that if it was going to make a move to change its trajectory, it would do so on October 29th. And then we would know, is this possibly a powered artificial object? Well, that happened. Mm-hmm. I mean, I don't think that there was anything particularly unusual that couldn't be explained prior to this, because when it first appeared, they said, oh, there was no tail. But then as the object came into closer view, there was a tail. There was no cloud, which is called a coma, and that's usually around a comet. But it got into closer view, and then there was a cloud. But then the first highly unusual thing happened, in that there was a tail also in the front.
Right.
So there's a lot of scientific reasons why that may be happening. Comets give off gas. It's called outgassing. It can also affect their trajectory. So that may be what happened, but when it got into position on October 29th, it made an unusual turn that we can't explain. It could be due to its unusual composition, but we can't explain it. So the fact of the matter is, a week before, he said, hey, if this does this, that is anomalous. It did that. And then everyone starts acting in bad faith. I was just looking at Reddit this morning, and there was all these people trying to say, it's nothing, based on nothing. If I'm not saying it's aliens, why are you saying it's not aliens?
Right.
This is self-censorship. This is exactly what we're talking about here. It's the psychological cage, and it's such a great example, and it's happening in real time too. And that's the big one. So we're going to focus on the mechanisms of information control, because if you don't know the information's out there, that's how you're kept, just like Kennedy. So the UAP phenomenon that we understand from whistleblowers and whatever data has leaked is non-kinetic, it's non-fossil fuel dependent, which makes it disruptive technology. Just disrupting the fossil fuel economy would cause so many massive changes, and those 2,000 to 5,000 elites we identified in our Who Runs the World episode, they are super dependent on that. That is a linchpin of our world economic system.
Yep.
So we could almost stop there. These things are clearly not being driven by fossil fuel, because it would take so much fossil fuel to do what they're doing. The objects would have to be enormous.
Right.
So they need to maintain that secrecy in order to maintain the economic cage, which is built on scarcity and resource control. Think rare earth metals, oil that leads to centralized power. Those things are basically money. Black gold, Texas tea, as the
Right.
Beverly Hillbillies would say. So UAP technology could shatter the entire energy, transportation, and defense economy, and could destroy the wealth base of a financial and industrial oligarchs. So secrecy becomes wealth preservation.
Yep.
You maintain secrecy through the military-industrial complex. The defense sector includes corporate oligarchs that utilize highly compartmentalized, unacknowledged special access programs, like the reported Immaculate Constellation program that we talked about that Matthew Brown had exposed, which is a database with all this UAP information. Unacknowledged special access program, which means nobody knows about it and they can still get money.
Right.
The classified nature of UAPs and the heavy reliance on private contractors like Lockheed, Raytheon, ensures that taxpayer-funded research becomes privatized intellectual property. And this secrecy allows contractors to set their own standards about who is allowed to know what, effectively creating a contractor-fed information cage. The lobbying, the donors, that's the cycle. That's the system. That's why you don't know about UFOs.
Right. And of course, you want to throw in, the process of lobbying and the revolving door in D.C., where politicians play nice with it because they know that someday they won't be in office and they want in.
And that's a legal cage.
Right.
And that brings us into the mechanisms of obfuscation, which involves classification and legal obfuscation. So they use FOIA exemptions because there are exemptions to FOIA. We keep seeing researchers say, I FOIA'd this, I FOIA'd that, but they don't always say what it is. Right. And then when they do give you the FOIA, it's heavily redacted. Yeah. And then other times they say this does not fall under FOIA. Exemption 3 in FOIA says that they don't have to provide FOIA information about anything that might be a trade secret if they're a defense contractor. So you see how this gets hidden. It just gets hidden even legally and systemically. So the legal cage turns public data into private, monetizable trade secrets, and that allows corporations to monopolize critical knowledge. This is a form of data privatization, and it guts democratic oversight, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But if people get too spun up about that, you can always use media and narrative control. And we call this the blur because we're so tired of the words flooding the zone.
Flooding the zone, right.
And this involves media concentration and disinformation. You have to own the media, and then you have to set the messages and the narratives. And I think what's most interesting today that's happening is this grab for influencers. Like we're watching these donors and big money people gather around people like Rogan, Laura Loomer. There's some on the left too that were taking money that didn't disclose it, like David Pakman, Brian Taylor Cohen, that they were exposed as being funded by big donors too.
It's so impactful. I mean, it's so easy too when you think about it, because you got these folks that are just of modest means, happen to be popular on YouTube, that can suddenly be multimillionaires. And it's just it's nothing for these oligarchs. It's petty cash.
Yeah, so they look at it like this is the opportunity of a lifetime, and then the oligarch looks at it like, okay, well, you're just one more talking head for me. They don't really care. Yeah. And they look at the effect on us as cattle. That's how they view us. I've worked for a couple of people on those richest 500 people in the U.S. list. And I can tell you they don't look at humanity in the public the same way you and I look at humanity in the public.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there's an obvious disconnection from normal society when you're an oligarch.
Media conglomerates have deep historic ties to intelligence community, and we've discussed some of this, and a lot of this came out in trials during the 70s. Like there was post MK Ultra era. People started finding out about all these mind control programs. There were hearings. So you can go back and look at a lot of that. I know we discussed that in some of our earlier episodes, but Thiem notes, Richard Thiem, who we discussed as the real birds in digital cage concept, he notes that the CIA was working with the New York Times, CBS, to control the narrative flow. And now that's becoming Laura Loomer.
Right.
Or whomever, wherever our eyeballs are, they need to control.
Yeah. It's kind of sad, too, because if you think back, I guess you could think back 15 years ago. Remember the Arab Spring, when there was suddenly these moves for democracy, or just these social movements in the Arab world? And it was based on this new form of communication. People were using Twitter, and people were using the internet to communicate and organize. And we're like, wow, look at this, the power of the internet. It's going to spread democracy through the world and social justice. It took maybe 5 to 10 years for the oligarchs of the world to just turn that right around, that cannon, right into the public's face. And just use it as a weapon against all of that. It doesn't exist anymore.
That's right. They're weaponizing influencers, and they're using them to either exclude information or trivialize information.
Yeah.
So this is typically what happens with UFOs, is they're either not talking about it, like people are not going to talk about the fact that Atlas just made a weird turn, or they trivialize it and they say, oh, that can all be explained by outgassing. Wait. You're going to have to do a whole paper on that. Yeah. I mean, we're talking about real science. We're talking about real observations. This was an observation that was anomalous. Yes, it could have a scientific explanation, but you just saying there's a scientific explanation is no different than someone telling me it's aliens.
Right.
So you force the public to rely on fragmented entertainment or infotainment.
Right.
Rather than government transparency. And you do that by gaining complicity. And you gain complicity by telling them something that they want to hear. So this is a common tactic. Scapegoating is the biggest one, right?
Right.
If you're all upset about this group of immigrants, and this has been going on since obviously World War II and before, if you're all upset about this group of immigrants, I'm going to pair my billionaire oligarchy agenda with your hatred of immigrants,
right.
And then you'll vote for me to have a big tax cut and for you to get nothing.
Yeah.
It's the same idea.
Yeah.
But that's how they get you to self-censor. That's how they get you to advocate for their agenda, is by going, okay, what is it that bothers you? Because we don't really care. Peter Thiel and the Antichrist doesn't really care.
Right.
He's like, hey, I'm just going to find something that motivates you and go, hey, if you care about this, then you care about my AI.
Right.
You have to push back when people buck that system. So there's also whistleblower retribution, which we would name as like the third part of this mechanism of obfuscation. And this involves bureaucratic retaliation, which is what David Grush is talking about right now. He's talking about a guy showing a gun to him while he was in the car. He's talking about his place being broken into, and it's been years now. So why are they still picking on David Grush? Not to shut him up, obviously, because he's already spoke and he's continuing to speak. It's to intimidate the next guy.
Right, exactly.
And then they get self-censorship out of that. That's how it all works. The fear cage reinforces the secrecy structure. And the oligarchy uses the threat of losing security clearance, professional isolation, financial ruin, or even criminal activities to discourage real birds from telling the truth. And that brings us to the money, the black budget and accountability gap.
You're talking about dollar bills, y'all?
That's right, baby. Classified budgets, that's where the dollars are. These special access programs often have classified budgets that prohibit meaningful oversight from Congress and allow them to spend indiscriminately on UAP. And so the financial cage prevents accountability. It both provides the money and then allows them to hide the money.
Right.
When Congress can't track the money trail, it can't verify the claims of UAP crash retrievals, reverse engineering programs, And it protects the financial pipeline of the military-industrial complex oligarchs.
So yeah, it's becoming pretty obvious that the UAP secret is not about little green men. It's about disruptive technology. Whistleblowers describe technologies with non-kinetic propulsion that defy known physics. So basically, it can be keeping us from free, abundant energy. And oligarchs don't like that. And if you look at, there's so many political think tanks and organizations in DC who are basically funded by fossil fuels.
That's right. The cost of chaos is too high. The oligarchy's wealth is rooted in controlling energy, transportation, and resource scarcity. So imagine if UAP tech did give us zero-point energy. That doesn't just crash ExxonMobil. It collapses an entire scarcity-based economy, an economy that runs on finite resources,
right?
Control over which gives you enormous control over the population. Those 2,000 to 5,000 elites depend on resource scarcity. And so UAP, to the extent that they would allow us free resources, threaten all of that. And you and I, is a good moment to mention, we had discussed a couple of times about Peter Thiel and how we felt very strongly that his motives were all fear-based. Mm-hmm. And then you shared an article with me earlier in the week that I have to read a quote from, because it's very rare that you get this type of extreme confirmation from a behavioral analysis.
Yeah.
It's like, hey, you guys were all right. So let me read you this quote from Peter Thiel here. It's from the Washington Post article titled Inside Billionaire Peter Thiel's Private Lectures, Warnings of the Antichrist. In it, and this was recorded, he said, "It's become quite difficult to hide one's money. An incredible machinery of tax treaties, financial surveillance, and sanctions architecture has been constructed. Wealth gives the illusion of power and autonomy. But you have this sense it could be taken away at any moment."
Right. He seems so worried about it. And if you look at him, he's always a sweaty mess. Have you noticed that?
Yes, he is.
It's like every second of his life, he's worried about his money being taken away. He's worth $20 billion.
And it's like he heard us saying that and decided to go, yeah, that's really what I'm upset about.
Right. It's amazing. And then when I came across the fact that he is actually into freezing his body, there's that company in Arizona that will take your money, so that when you die, they will put you in a cryogenic slumber, or they just freeze your body. Basically, they fill up your fluids. They fill you up with basically antifreeze and throw you in a freezer so you can be brought back to life in the future. Why, if you're a deeply religious person, why the
Great question.
How would you want that?
Great question. Yes, if you're so Christian, wouldn't you rather move on to the next step?
Yeah, wouldn't you believe in the afterlife? You want to be pulled out of the afterlife 50 years later?
Yeah.
Just
kind of blows up his whole argument, doesn't it?
Yeah.
These people are ridiculous. And they live with the 5% problem, which is what we call it when 95% of UAP sightings are explained, but the other 5% have never been explained,
right,
and have been going on forever.
Right.
The oligarchy doesn't have to hide 100% of the reports. They only have to disabuse the 5%. They only have to trivialize or normalize the 5% and just say, oh, that's nothing, because the 95% were fake.
Right.
And hiding that 5% requires a constant background of static and doubt. It's the psychological cage that they really need to put you in to trivialize it. I can't emphasize that enough. They just want to say it's nothing. Don't worry about it, even though they're obsessed with it.
Right, right.
So they don't need to fool us. They just have to exhaust us into indifference. If we look at this in the context of what our godfather John Keel said, it's very similar when he talked about Operation Trojan Horse, and he talked about all of this stuff 60 years ago. So it's still happening. We can confirm that because we did all of the research to confirm that it's still happening and that he was right the first time. It's a phenomenon that's being kept secret by misdirection and control. But they use different language based on the era's dominant technology and societal concerns. So like in Keel's time, it was EM waves, and he was all about electromagnetic waves. So they were trying to trivialize that. In our time, it's quantum. So they're trying to trivialize that. And we've always said we think that this phenomenon is heavily reliant on quantum mechanics, but maybe the next generation will have a science that will take us even further. We just can only deal with the science we have of the time. And if we were to acknowledge some of this stuff and start from here, and this is why we are so passionate about talking about how this phenomenon is an adaptive expression of an unknown intelligence. And the three of us came up with that. You, me, and our audience. Like, we own that. That is our definition of UAP. They are an adaptive expression of an unknown intelligence. Changed my mind. So Keel saw this as the ultra-terrestrials, or the NHI, the beings who are really at the heart of this, and they might be. At this point, I would say they are either at the heart of this and controlling it, or there's some sort of collusion going on between these groups and the beings. Because in order to maintain this secrecy, it takes both of them. It takes both the elites hiding it, and it takes the phenomenon hiding itself. So why wouldn't they collude? And we have a number of anecdotal cases and evidence that says that they've met. But Keel saw these ultra-terrestrials as non-human, ancient, and often malevolent. He did say that they existed outside of space and time. So all of that aligns. I mean, the often malevolent thing, I think, is debatable, but because we just don't have the whole spectrum to analyze. We don't have the whole spectrum of interactions to analyze. So can we say it's over 50% bad? I don't think we can say that with assurance, right?
Right. Especially with just the growing number of experiencers coming out. I mean, it's not all negative, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's gray. We don't really know. It is manipulative. They are in control, clearly, because anytime you make all the rules, you're in far more control than anyone else is in the game.
Right.
But this system, this network, is a shadowy, high-level, almost breakaway civilization. That's a concept that I know Richard Dolan really likes. But if they have more knowledge of the UAP phenomenon than us, it gives them more capabilities than us, then yes, they're breaking away. We can look at this with AI. If you have AI that is more capable of someone else's AI, and it can make your business more successful, then you're kind of breaking away from them. They no longer can compete with you. And Keel would refer to the method of control as sort of a psychic circus. And the phenomenon would manufacture like bizarre, theatrical, and constantly changing events. Like Mothman was something more akin to folklore. Aliens are something more akin to science fiction. And then we have the angels and the demons, which are more akin to something biblical.
Right.
But the fact that all of these things are appearing at once, and either we're Grand Central Station for the interdimensional travelers of the universe, or it's all one thing, and it's attempting to maintain its secrecy and obfuscate by showing up as different things. And once again, here we are 5 years later saying, it sure looks like it's more the latter. It's all one thing. They're showing up as different things. These interactions all have a consistent pattern. So we see that psychic circus as more narrative control. The financial elite network tends to leak sometimes, it spins, and it controls information when it leaks. And they do this through carefully cultivated political and media assets. Whistleblowers, journalists, think tanks, influencers to shape public perception, maintain secrecy. Those things are really necessary. But what's their motive? Keel saw it more as ideological or psychological leverage. You were creating a new, destabilizing, and confusing mythology that you could then control and distract from its manipulative nature. And I think we see this as more systemic and financial leverage, which is not altogether different. Those two things are closely aligned.
Yep.
But it allows you to maintain an unaccountable, multi-trillion-dollar security state that is hidden from political oversight and can use UAP and NHI information as its ultimate source of power and leverage. And in order to keep all that buried, you have to hide what Fort would refer to as the damned data.
Right.
And that's why it was damned. You're not allowed to talk about it.
Right.
He called his first book, Book of the Damned. And it was damned facts. And he was like, these are facts that no one wants to talk about because they dispute all of their theories and hypotheses about all of the other facts.
Right, right.
So what do? You just bury them and you say, hey, this is the world you live in. Don't look at these things. Or that'll tell you it's not the world you live in.
And I know one of Keel's big Fortean observations was that the phenomenon is kind of a chameleonic in the sense that it acts like a Trojan horse and smuggles bizarre new beliefs in society to kind of distract us.
Yeah, he thought it was doing so with a sort of a malevolent agenda, which
Right.
It might be. We're not sure. We have to keep investigating to find out. But I think we complement that by saying that there is also a human intelligence apparatus that appears to be working with, whether it is through a marriage of convenience or through direct interactions.
Right, right.
They appear to be working together to create some type of a breakaway civilization scenario. And they want you to be distracted by the philosophical mystery of UAP so that you miss out on all of the political and financial corruption that enables its secrecy.
Right.
So we're really trying to complement John Keel's, fill it out more. We're trying to say, okay, this is the other half. There's two halves to this. It's not just the UAP that are doing this. There's also a very human segment of our society that is maintaining this, and they're doing so with an agenda of their own.
Yeah.
And I think we have to see all of that so that we can figure out how to get through it all.
And you know what? This is a really good point we need to talk about is that as we wrap up this episode, is that we are approaching November. Collectively, we've been seeing a very obvious pattern when it comes to UAP activity. And remember, the New Jersey drone incident has always been the highest activity on the coast of these so-called drones was in November. So we're approaching this timeline again, and we get to see if this obvious pattern continues.
Yeah, they told me it would. They said that it would peak in November again. I know I wasn't about to say that, but I did. And I should mention I was on the Higher Side chats. I talked a lot about
that's right,
things that I've never talked about on this show. If you're interested, I know that that's up on the highersidechats.com. So you can hear some more information about some of this contact that I've been dealing with and what that was all about. But I'll just mention it real briefly here because we've talked about it before. But and I do want to do a whole wrap up of what that show was because we've never presented that stuff here at Fortean Winds. It would just take us a long time to do it here.
Yeah, that was a great episode.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I know that audience is more familiar with the crazy, so I was just felt free to just let it all out there. But I do understand that there was a bunch of questions there, and I want to put together some stuff to try to round that out some. But anyway, my long way of saying They told me that it was going to be mid-November that there would be another peak.
Yeah. And we're already seeing a sign because I just heard that the Reagan airport in Washington, D.C. had a bunch of, was basically grounded all flights because of some mysterious object in airspace. So it might just have suddenly happened. So we'll see.
Just like last year.
Yeah,
and look at how it keeps ramping up. And it hasn't ramped up yet this year, but they told me that this year they would probably complete data collection, whatever that means. And they said I should be questioning what happens after they finish data collection. And I said, well, what happens after you finish data collection? They said, that's the question you should be asking.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I guess we'll try to figure that one out next.
Yeah, the obvious patterns are really, really fascinating.
It is. It's clearly data collection because we've seen no physical interactions. So it's recon.
Yeah.
Recon for what?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I still struggle to understand why they would need so much intelligence in order to invade.
Right.
I mean, they're so much more powerful than us. It just doesn't make sense. But they're sending a message. I mean, I think that is clear, that they are sending a message. And then there's the whole thing about nukes where, you know, and we talked about this a long time ago. And I said, look, they're telling me this nuke stuff. And at the time, there wasn't that much going on with nukes. So I was like, I don't even know why they're telling me or why I would feel the need to say it. But they were effusive. So I said it. And here we are. Like Trump saying, you know, he wants us to restart nuclear testing.
That's right. So there's more saber rattling going on again with nukes. Yeah. Not good.
And their connection to nukes is clear. We just got another scientific paper that makes that clear from Dr. Beatrice Villarreal. And in her paper, she shows that there were artificial objects that were reflecting sunlight pre-Sputnik, like back in the 50s.
Wow.
And they appeared plus or minus 1 day from nuclear tests. There was a strong correlation. And then there was a weak correlation to UAP events, but there was a strong correlation to the time the White House got visited by UFOs back in the 50s. There is one more piece of scientific proof that these things are correlated. And I would bet dollars to donuts that if you looked up there today, you'd be seeing some of those same reflections. It's just that we couldn't parse them out given all the crap that's floating around in our orbit these days.
Right.
So we end up with the same result. I mean, the truth is a controlled narrative. It's designed to leverage human attention for the benefit of a hidden intelligence. Whether that intelligence is non-human or an ultra-powerful secret human network, we have to look at it through this lens to create a direct, measurable target for investigation in the form of systemic power structures, because that's what's keeping this all hidden. If we choose to look at it through the lens of government and power and media and public, or we could go off and do crazy experiments in cemeteries and on the sides of mountains and share data. Like there is another path for us, right?
So I think that's a good place to wrap up. I mean, we're on the verge of another movement when it comes to the UAP activity, and we are also just witnessing a lot of abuse of power and a lot of just disinformation. So we're going to help our listeners decipher it all and separate them, and we'll analyze them as it goes on. But we're living in extraordinary times, people.
That's Bones' catchphrase. Yeah, historic, truly historic times. And you rarely recognize history as you're living through it, but here we are. And if we looked at this through political history or world history, as well as UFO history, these things are unprecedented.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
And I'm glad to be going through it with all of yous.
That's right. All right. Well, good discussion, Ram. Thanks again.
Thank you, Bones. Oh, and just real quick, I know some people have left fan mail or send us a text. We have that feature on some of our episodes. I don't know how to respond to that. They don't give you an easy way to respond to that Buzzsprout fan mail. So if you're trying to get us and you want to hear from us, YouTube is probably the best place to do that. We get notifications there and we can respond there.
Yeah, definitely. All right, and of course, never forget, you can always visit our website at forteanwinds.com. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks, y'all. Take care out there. Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.